It's been almost 4 years since Florida voters restored voting rights to most of the state's residents with felony convictions, with a constitutional initiative called Amendment 4. Nearly 1.5 million people who'd completed their sentences and done their time had their right to vote restored, with some exceptions. So newly released videos are raising questions about why then this was allowed to happen. Have a look.
So if you could put your hands around your back, please.
Oh my God.
Do not move.
Ultimately, ma'am, you have a warrant. Okay. The warrant's... Hold on, listen. I know you caught off guard. I understand. Right? So you have a warrant. It's for voter fraud. Okay? Hear me out. It's an ROR. You know what an ROR is?
Oh my God. I'm like, voter fraud. I voted, but I ain't commit no fraud.
Well, so that's the thing. I don't know exactly what happened with it, but you do have a warrant.
That rather chilling arrest footage, obtained through a records request by the Tampa Bay Times, happened this summer on the morning of August the 18th. In fact, cops across Florida were fanning out that morning, carrying out 20 arrest warrants, so that later in the day, Republican Governor Ron DeSantis could hold a press conference touting the arrests as a coup for his election police force.
The state of Florida has charged and is in the process of arresting 20 individuals across the state for voter fraud. This is a third-degree felony in the state of Florida. They could face a $5,000 fine and up to 5 years in prison for illegally voting in our elections.
If you watch this show regularly, you know we've talked about the authoritarianism of Ron DeSantis. And in the case of that arrest and 19 others, Governor DeSantis was weaponizing Amendment 4 against largely poorer people who might not realize they were committing a crime. Here's what Ramona Oliver was actually doing, the alleged crime for which she was arrested in Ron DeSantis' Florida. On Valentine's Day 2020, Ramona Oliver stepped into the Hillsborough County Tax Collector's office and registered to vote. A clerk asked Oliver if she had ever had a felony conviction. Oliver said yes, full disclosure. Oliver had recently been released from a woman's prison after serving 18 years for second-degree murder. And while in prison, she had read about Amendment 4. So then the clerks helped her process her voter registration. She got her voter ID in the mail, and that fall, Oliver, now 55, voted for the first time in her life. And that was that. Or so she thought. Until August, when the police showed up to Ramona Oliver's house at 6:52 a.m. Why wasn't Ramona Oliver's right to vote restored? Because of this exception to the constitutional amendment.
They are disqualified from voting because they've been convicted of either murder or sexual assault, and they do not have the right to vote. They did not get their rights restored, and yet they went ahead and voted anyways. That is against the law, and now they're going to pay the price for it.
That is against the law, he said. But hold on, who exactly gave them their voter registration cards? Who cleared them to vote anyways? As Governor Ron DeSantis seeks re-election ahead of a possible 2024 run for president, we need to talk about his unrelenting war on democracy in the Sunshine State, punishing citizens for the mistakes made by his government. Yes, his. Take a look at the video from another one of those August arrests of a man named Tony Patterson.
It's 2 felony charges for voter fraud, but they've reduced it to $500 bonds. So it's $1,000 total.
Oh my God, man, what the?
Yes, sir. So unfortunately, right now, we're going to have to take you to jail.
Tony Patterson was told he broke the law by voting, despite the fact that the state government, DeSantis' state government, had reviewed and approved his voter registration. Just as Ramona Oliver had gotten help from state clerks to submit her voter registration, and the DeSantis-appointed Secretary of State had cleared her to vote twice. In all, of the 19 people successfully served warrants for alleged voter fraud ahead of that DeSantis presser, 12 were registered Democrats and 13 of them were black. The videos of their arrests show how even Florida police don't get it, don't understand why they're having to arrest these people. It's because of Ron DeSantis' cynicism and cruelty. You see, even though 65% of the state's voters approved that measure to restore felons' rights, including a majority of Republicans in Florida, DeSantis led a push to make rights restoration more difficult, more costly for felons. And then he sent his quote-unquote election police. He sent them out to make an example of people who largely don't look like Ron DeSantis. It's a very different example from the one his prosecutors have set with the mostly white, mostly Republican voters convicted of fraud in the Villages, convicted of voter fraud in the Villages, a very conservative stronghold in that state. Back in April, 2 men there pled guilty to actual voter fraud, casting 2 ballots in the 2020 election. Their penalty? Community service and a civics class. Probably just a coincidence, right? Like the way voting rights activists earlier this month asked DeSantis to suspend the state's new voting restrictions, GOP voting restrictions, in 24 counties hit by Hurricane Ian. And DeSantis lifted those constraints on mail-in ballots, on early voting, but only in 3 deep red counties. Just them, not in Democratic-leaning counties like Orange County, Hillsborough, Pinellas. So many coincidences. Like how last spring, in an unprecedented move, Republican legislators in Florida just abdicated their usual closely guarded power over redistricting, just gave it to Ron DeSantis to redraw the state's congressional map. And his map just happened to eliminate 2 districts held by black lawmakers, while adding 4 Republican-friendly new districts. What a coincidence. What another coincidence. Except according to an investigation last week by ProPublica, DeSantis secretly consulted out-of-state Republicans on his map, a move that may have violated the state's law. Records obtained by ProPublica show that DeSantis aides worked behind the scenes with an attorney who serves as the national GOP's top redistricting lawyer and other consultants tied to the national party apparatus. That is a likely violation of the state constitution's Fair Districting Amendment passed by Florida voters in 2010 to ban partisan redistricting. A retired Chief Justice of the Florida Supreme Court told ProPublica that DeSantis' outside collaboration with national Republicans appeared to be, quote, significant evidence of a violation of the constitutional amendment. Coincidence? Come on. DeSantis and his camp declined to comment to ProPublica on their investigation. But in fairness to him, he does serve as a bit of a contrast to many of the election-denying MAGA Republicans running for office. You won't catch DeSantis on tape saying Trump won the 2020 election, but he's kept the Trumpy base on board by positioning himself as a bully who will win at all costs, who will take down every guardrail that limits his power. You think the election deniers are bad? Ron DeSantis in many ways is worse. He already has his potentially unlawful gerrymandered map. He already has GOP voting restrictions that he can suspend in GOP counties. And he already has an election police force literally raiding people's homes, mostly black people's homes, in order to use their arrests as a political stunt at a press conference. Imagine what you would call a man like that if he were the head of a foreign country. And now imagine what that man could do in the Oval Office come 2025. Joining me now are David Daley, Senior Fellow at Fair Vote and author of the 2020 book Unrigged, How Americans Are Battling Back to Save Democracy, and Jasmine Burney Clark, Orlando-based founder of the voting rights group Equal Ground. Thank you both for joining me. David, you've covered multiple gerrymanders in multiple states by both parties, including by Republicans in previous redistricting cycles in Florida. But this time around, Ron DeSantis rejected the GOP legislature's map as not pro-Republican enough and pushed through his own map as governor. How unprecedented is that, and how bad is this new map compared to previous gerrymanders?
It's absolutely unprecedented. I'm still waiting for Ron DeSantis's election fraud police force to show up at the governor's mansion, because this governor has absolutely shredded the Fair Districts Amendment passed by, as you said, nearly 2/3 of Florida voters back in 2010, guaranteeing that there would be a nonpartisan process that does not favor Democrats or Republicans in the state of Florida. Republicans in Florida's legislature, which ran a secret shadow process back in 2010 and 2011 that it took the state's Supreme Court several years to unwind and finally mandate a new map, they actually ran a reasonable process this time. The congressional map in Florida still favored Republicans, but it was pretty much a status quo map. What Ron DeSantis has done here is cut the number of black majority districts in Florida in half. He took the district of Al Lawson and put it into a paper shredder as well, attaching that district to 4 different new white Republican majority seats. And in a nation in which control of Congress could come down to just a handful of seats, the lawlessness here in Florida of Governor DeSantis could well determine control of the U.S. House for every American.
And Jasmine, looking at the totality of these measures, the DeSantis map that cracks 2 majority-minority districts, the arrests of those 20 people in August, the selective suspension of voting restrictions after Hurricane Ian, overall, what role do you think race is playing in all of the governor's calculations?
Governor DeSantis' attack on democracy and on Black representation is driven by his ambition to be president of the United States. It is a transparent attempt to gain favor with essentially national party bosses who want to pick up more Republican seats in Congress without regard for fairness. This governor's congressional districting plan deeply diminishes Black representation. And while statewide elections in Florida are essentially decided by fractions of a percent, his election, in fact, was one of those. The governor's plans to rig the 28 districts so that 20 of them would elect Republicans and only 8 would give Democrats a chance in Congress this upcoming election. The right to vote and administer elections can't be solely left in the hands of state governments, because we will be left with laws created by an authoritarian governor like DeSantis for years to come. This governor's actions harm every Floridian, however, regardless of race, no matter what we look like or where we come from or what office people hold. Everyone must obey the law as it is written. And this governor has decided not to actually do that.
And Jasmine, just to follow up on that, I want to run this astonishing statistic past you. When Ron DeSantis was elected governor in 2018, he got just over 4 million votes. That same year, voters passed Amendment 4 to restore felons' voting rights with more than 5.1 million votes. Over 1 million more Floridians voted for felon rights than for Ron DeSantis, and yet after entering office, he pushes through a law that makes it all but impossible for felons to regain those rights.
What you're seeing here is an example of 20 years of intentional discrimination by this governor and or governors ahead of his time in this state. In order to pass a constitutional or ballot initiative in this state, it has to gain 60% of the vote, unlike his race, which only requires 50% of the vote. He knew that going in, and so he knew that the hurdle to get this passed would be difficult and didn't think organizers on the ground would be able to meet it, and they did. So now he has chosen to create a fees and fines process, which essentially is a poll tax that creates another hurdle for Black and brown folks to be able to participate.
Indeed, poll tax is the right word. Dave, DeSantis may be the worst of the bunch, but there are a lot of states where voters are going to the polls in illegally gerrymandered districts. That's because the Supreme Court is letting elections go forward this November in North Carolina, Alabama, Georgia, and Louisiana with maps that have already been thrown out by lower courts. What is going on? How is the Supreme Court letting elections go ahead on illegal maps?
And perhaps the worst of those as well is Ohio, where citizens also went to the polls and amended the state constitution in order to have fair redistricting. And Republicans on the state redistricting commission again and again, not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 7 times, had bipartisan majorities on the state Supreme Court throw those maps out as unconstitutional. And yet they ran out the clock, and that map is going to be the one that is used for congressional and state legislative elections in Ohio. It could result in a 13-2 Republican congressional map in a state that is probably a 54-46 state. What the U.S. Supreme Court did back in 2019 in the Rucho versus Common Cause case, when they said partisan gerrymandering is a political issue, it's up to the states to involve. What they did was they effectively unleashed all of these states to do their absolute worst with no check on them whatsoever, from state constitutioners, from governors or state constitutions. And now There's about to be a case at the U.S. Supreme Court in December, Moore versus Harper, which is the case over the independent state legislative theory, which is what you've covered on this show in the past. And it is so absurd and a wackadoodle theory. And the idea that state constitutions and state Supreme Courts and governors ought to have no control over checking runaway gerrymandered legislatures that are entrenching themselves in power is absolutely nuts. And Ohio and Alabama, these are examples 1 and 2 of why we still need a state Supreme Courts.